Good evening, dear listener. Tonight, we journey back to the gentle glow of gaslit Paris, to a time when conversation was an art form and ideas flowed like wine through elegant drawing rooms. Whether you're settling into bed or listening with closed eyes, I invite you to drift back to the Belle Epoque, that beautiful era from 1871 to 1914, when Paris became the cultural heart of the world. Close your eyes and imagine stepping through the heavy wooden doors of a Parisian mansion on a crisp autumn evening in 1893. The soft murmur of voices mingles with the gentle tinkling of crystal glasses and the rustle of silk gowns. Welcome to the world of the Parisian salon, where artists, writers, philosophers, and musicians gathered to share their dreams and debate the great questions of their time. The enchanted world of Madame Céleste Dubois, our story, begins in the elegant 7th arrondissement. In the mansion of Madame Céleste Dubois, a woman whose Tuesday evening salons had become legendary throughout Europe. Madame Dubois, with her silver hair arranged in perfect chignon and her keen blue eyes that seemed to read souls, had transformed her spacious drawing room into a sanctuary for creative minds. Every Tuesday at precisely 7 o'clock, as the gas lamps flickered to life across Paris, carriages would arrive at number 37, Rue de Varenne. The clip-clop of horses' hooves on cobblestones announced the arrival of painters still smudged with oils, writers clutching manuscripts, and musicians carrying violin cases worn smooth by years of devoted practice. Madame Dubois had inherited this grand mansion from her late husband, Monsieur Edouard Dubois, a successful silk merchant who had understood his wife's passionate love for the arts. The drawing room stretched nearly 40 feet in length, its walls adorned with paintings by emerging artists whom Madame Dubois had discovered in the narrow streets of Montmartre. Crystal chandeliers cast warm pools of light over Persian carpets, while comfortable armchairs and small round tables created intimate spaces for conversation. The ritual of each salon evening began with Madame Dubois greeting her guests at the door, her dove-gray silk dress rustling softly as she moved from group to group, introducing strangers who would become lifelong collaborators. She possessed an almost mystical ability to sense which personalities would spark interesting conversations, gently guiding a melancholy poet toward an optimistic painter, or bringing together a composer struggling with a difficult passage and philosopher fascinated by the mathematics of music. The gentle art of conversation in these salons. Conversation was treated as a delicate art form requiring patience, wit, and genuine curiosity about others. Unlike the hurried discussions of our modern world, salon conversations unfolded slowly, like flowers blooming in morning sunlight. A single topic might occupy an entire evening, with participants approaching it from every conceivable angle, building ideas layer upon layer until something entirely new emerged. Consider the evening when young Marcel Fontaine, a struggling painter from the provinces, first attended Madame Dubois's salon. Marcel had arrived in Paris with 3 francs in his pocket and a portfolio of landscapes painted in his village near Lyon. His clothes were patched, and his shoes worn thin from walking the cobblestones in search of work. But his eyes burned with the intensity of someone who saw beauty in every shadow and light. Madame Dubois recognized something special in this quiet young man and seated him beside Professeur Henri Moreau, a distinguished art critic from the École des Beaux-Arts. Rather than overwhelming Marcel with academic theories, the professor began by asking gentle questions about the light in Marcel's village, the way shadows fell across the wheat fields at harvest time, the colors that appeared in the sky just before sunset as the evening progressed. Other guests were drawn into this conversation about light and color. Madame Sophie Beaumont, a pianist known for her interpretations of Chopin, described how different qualities of light seemed to correspond to different musical keys. Dr. Antoine Rousseau, a scientist studying optics, explained the physics of how the eye perceives color, while Mademoiselle Claire Dupont, a poet, spoke of how Homer described light in the Odyssey. By evening's end, Marcel had filled several pages with notes and sketches. His understanding of his own art expanded beyond anything he had imagined possible. More importantly, he had found a community of people who shared his passion for beauty and meaning. Within a year, Marcel's paintings were being exhibited in respected galleries, and he had become a regular contributor to the Salon's evening conversations. The daily rhythm of artistic Paris. The Belle Epoque Paris, where these salons flourished, was a city awakening to new possibilities. Each morning, as church bells chimed across the arrondissements, the artistic quarters would come alive with a gentle bustle of creative activity. In Montmartre, painters would climb the winding streets to capture the morning light on their canvases, while in the Latin Quarter, writers would settle into café corners with their notebooks and pens. The working day for most Parisians began early, but the artistic community followed different rhythms. Painters needed natural light, so they worked from sunrise until the golden glow of late afternoon began to fade. Writers often preferred the quiet hours before dawn or the mysterious twilight when imagination seemed to flow more freely. Musicians practiced in the morning when their fingers were nimble and their minds clear, saving their compositions for the dreamy hours of evening. By afternoon, these creative souls would begin their gentle migration toward the salons. They would stop first at their favorite cafes for a light meal and conversation with fellow artists. The Café de Flore on Boulevard Saint-Germain was particularly beloved by writers, who would sit for hours at marble-topped tables, sipping coffee and discussing the great novels of the day. The proprietor, Monsieur Paul Bouchard, understood that artists needed time to think and dream, so he never hurried his customers, even when they made a single cup of coffee last an entire afternoon. The Café Gerbois, near Place, Pigalle attracted painters who would arrive with paint still under their fingernails, eager to debate the revolutionary techniques of Impressionism. Here, established artists like Claude Monet and Pierrot Desrumaux would mentor younger painters, sharing technical secrets about capturing fleeting effects of light and shadow. The conversations were animated but never harsh, filled with the excitement of people discovering new ways to see the world. Musicians often gathered at the Café de la Paix near the Opera House, where the sounds of horse-drawn carriages and street vendors created a symphony of urban life that inspired their compositions. Madame Elise Girard, a composer known for her delicate piano pieces, would sit by the window listening to the rhythmic clip-clop of horses, translating these everyday sounds into melodies that captured the heartbeat of Paris. The architecture of inspiration. The physical spaces where these artistic communities gathered were themselves works of art that inspired creativity. The typical Parisian salon took place in a grand bourgeois apartment with high ceilings, tall windows, and rooms that flowed gracefully from one to another. These spaces had been designed during the renovations of Baron Haussmann, who had transformed medieval Paris into the elegant city of wide boulevards and harmonious architecture that we recognize today. Madame Du Bois's drawing room exemplified the ideal salon space. The walls were painted a warm cream color that flattered both the artwork and the complexion of her guests. Heavy silk curtains in deep burgundy could be drawn against the winter cold, creating an intimate atmosphere, or pulled back to reveal tall windows that looked out onto a private garden. Even in winter, when the plane trees were bare, the garden provided a sense of natural beauty that seemed to nurture the creative spirit. The furniture had been chosen not just for elegance but for comfort during long evenings of conversation. Deep armchairs upholstered in tapestry fabric invited guests to settle in and stay a while. Small tables placed strategically throughout the room held refreshments and provided surfaces for sketching or note-taking. A grand piano in one corner was always kept perfectly tuned, ready for impromptu performances that might illustrate a point or inspire new ideas. The lighting in these salons was crucial to their atmosphere. Gas lamps had recently been installed throughout Paris, providing steadier illumination than candles, but the light was still warm and gentle, creating pools of golden glow that seemed to encourage intimacy and reflection. Madame Dubois had commissioned special glass shades that diffused the light softly, eliminating harsh shadows while providing enough brightness for reading and writing. The walls themselves told stories of the salon's history and values. Rather than filling every inch with expensive paintings, Madame Dubois had created carefully composed arrangements that mixed established masterpieces with works by promising newcomers. A small landscape by Camille Corot hung beside a bold portrait by an unknown artist from Brittany. Japanese woodblock prints, newly arrived from the East, shared wall space with classical etchings, creating visual conversations that paralleled the verbal ones taking place below. Fresh flowers appeared throughout the room in crystal vases, changed weekly to reflect the seasons. In spring, branches of cherry blossoms brought the renewal of nature indoors. Summer brought armfuls of roses from the garden, their fragrance mingling with the scent of evening jasmine that drifted through open windows. Autumn featured chrysanthemums and the last roses of the season, while winter called for evergreen branches and holly, reminders that beauty persists even in the darkest months. The gentle rhythms of salon society, the social customs governing salon behavior, had evolved over centuries, creating unwritten rules that ensured everyone felt welcome and comfortable. Guests understood that the evening belonged to ideas rather than personalities, so even the most famous writers and painters were expected to listen as much as they spoke. Interruptions were considered terribly rude, and conversations proceeded with the measured pace of a careful dance. When guests first arrived, they would spend several minutes in general greetings, inquiring after each other's health and family, sharing news of recent travels or artistic projects. This warm-up period allowed everyone to settle into the evening's rhythm and helped newcomers feel included in the established community. Madame Dubois moved gracefully through these initial conversations, remembering details from previous weeks and making connections between different guests' interests. Transition from social pleasantries to serious discussion happened naturally, usually sparked by someone mentioning a book they had recently read or a painting they had seen at the Louvre. These casual references would capture the attention of others, who would add their own observations or ask thoughtful questions. Gradually, smaller conversations would merge into larger ones as the entire salon became focused on a single fascinating topic. The most memorable salon evenings often began with the simplest observations. One Tuesday in October 1894, a young poet named Philippe Moreau mentioned how the changing color of autumn leaves reminded him of a passage in Baudelaire's Les Fleurs du Mal. This casual remark sparked a discussion that lasted until nearly midnight, ranging from the psychology of color perception to the role of nature imagery in romantic poetry. Dr. Jean-Baptiste Laurent, a physician with interests in the emerging field of psychology, explained how the human eye perceives colors differently depending on the surrounding light and the observer's emotional state. Mademoiselle Isabelle Rousseau, a painter specializing in landscapes, demonstrated this principle by showing how the same green pigment could appear warm or cool depending on the colors placed beside it. The conversation deepened when Madame Catherine Delon, a philosophy professor from the Sorbonne, introduced ideas from German aesthetics about the relationship between natural beauty and human consciousness. She spoke in measured tones about how Immanuel Kant had argued that our appreciation of beauty reflects something fundamental about how the human mind organizes. Experience. This philosophical discussion might have become too abstract, but Professor Auguste Blanchard, a musicologist, brought it back to concrete experience by playing a short piano piece that seemed to capture the melancholy beauty of autumn. The music created a moment of shared emotion that everyone could feel, making the philosophical concept suddenly vivid and personal. The art of hospitality. The Success of these salons depended greatly on the subtle art of hospitality practiced by their hostesses. Madame Dubois had perfected this art over many years, learning to balance structure with spontaneity, ensuring that every guest felt valued while maintaining the focus necessary for meaningful conversation. The refreshments served at salon evenings were carefully chosen to support the intellectual atmosphere rather than distract from it. Light foods that could be eaten gracefully while continuing to talk were preferred over elaborate meals that would have interrupted the flow of conversation. Delicate pastries from the renowned patisserie of Monsieur Louis' store provided sweetness without heaviness, while savory canapes offered more substantial nourishment for those who came directly from work. The beverages reflected the sophisticated but moderate character of salon society. Fine wines were available but not emphasized, as the goal was mental clarity rather than intoxication. Tea service continued throughout the evening for those who preferred gentle stimulation, while coffee was offered to guests who needed extra alertness for complex discussions. Crystal water glasses were constantly refilled, as proper hydration was considered essential for clear thinking. Madame Dubois had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when conversations needed gentle guidance. If a discussion became too heated, she would introduce a related but less controversial topic or invite someone with a calming personality to share their perspective. When conversations began to fragment into multiple smaller groups, she would pose a question interesting enough to draw everyone back together. If energy began to flag late in the evening, she might ask the pianist to play something beautiful, giving everyone a few minutes to rest their minds while their spirits were renewed by music. The timing of salon evenings reflected deep understanding of human social rhythms. Beginning at 7 o'clock allowed people to arrive after completing their day's work, but while their minds were still alert and engaged. A gentle pace meant that conversations could develop fully without anyone feeling rushed, while the customary ending time of 11 o'clock respected the fact that most guests would need to rise early the next morning. The flowering of female intellect, one of the most remarkable aspects of Belle Epoque salon culture, was the central role played by women as intellectual leaders and cultural innovators. In an era when women were excluded from universities and professional careers, the salons provided a space where female intelligence could flourish and be recognized. Madame Dubois herself exemplified this phenomenon. Though she had never received formal education beyond what was considered appropriate for young ladies of her class, her natural intelligence and years of salon hosting had made her one of the most knowledgeable cultural critics in Paris. Writers and painters sought her opinion on their work, knowing that her judgment was both discerning and encouraging. Her ability to recognize talent in its early stages had become legendary, and an invitation to present one's work at her salon was considered a significant honor. Other remarkable women graced the salon regularly. Mademoiselle Marguerite Beaumont had shocked society by declining several excellent marriage proposals to pursue her passion for astronomy. She had built a small observatory in the garden of her family's estate outside Paris and regularly attended meetings of the French Astronomical Society, where she was the only female member. Her Tuesday evening discussions of recent celestial discoveries brought a sense of wonder about the universe that complemented the earthly concerns of artists and poets. Madame Veronique Dupont had established herself as one of Paris's most insightful literary critics, writing under a masculine pseudonym for several prestigious journals. At the salon, however, she could speak in her own voice about the novels and poetry that were reshaping French literature. Her analyses of contemporary writers were so perceptive that several authors would revise their manuscripts based on comments she made during salon discussions. The atmosphere of intellectual equality that prevailed in these gatherings was remarkable for its time. Women's ideas were taken as seriously as men's, and female guests were expected to contribute substantively to every conversation. This expectation had gradually raised the level of discourse, as both men and women prepared for salon evenings by reading widely and thinking deeply about current artistic and intellectual trends. The gentle feminism that emerged from salon culture was revolutionary in its quiet way. Rather than demanding rights through political confrontation, these women simply demonstrated their intellectual capabilities through consistent excellence in cultural leadership. Their influence extended far beyond the salon walls, as the men who attended these gatherings carried respect for female intelligence into their professional and personal lives. The international character of Parisian culture Belle Epoque, Paris attracted creative minds from throughout Europe and beyond, creating a cosmopolitan atmosphere that enriched salon conversations with diverse perspectives and experiences. The city's reputation as a center of artistic freedom drew painters from Russia, writers from Scandinavia, musicians from Germany, and intellectuals from across the Mediterranean. At Madame Du Bois's salon, this international character was particularly pronounced. Count Alexander Volkonsky, a Russian exile who had fled political troubles in St. Petersburg, brought insights from Slavic literature and Orthodox theology that fascinated his French colleagues. His deep, melancholy voice would fill the salon as he recited poems by Pushkin in the original Russian, then provided translations that captured not just the meaning but the musical qualities of the verse. Señor Carlos Méndez, a Spanish painter studying at the École des Beaux-Arts, contributed perspectives on light and color influenced by his Mediterranean heritage. His descriptions of how sunlight struck the white walls of Andalusian villages helped his French colleagues understand why Spanish painters approached color so differently from their northern counterparts. His passionate but gentle manner of speaking seemed to embody the warmth of southern sunshine. Dr. Heinrich Müller, a German philosopher visiting Paris to research at the Bibliothèque Nationale, participated in discussions with the thoroughness and precision characteristic of German scholarship, but tempered by the grace he had absorbed from French salon culture. His systematic approach to philosophical questions provided useful structure for conversations that might otherwise have wandered too freely among fascinating but disconnected ideas. Miss Emma Thornton, an English writer researching a novel about Parisian artistic life, brought the perspective of an outsider who could observe French cultural patterns with fresh eyes. Her questions often revealed assumptions that Parisians took for granted, leading to deeper exploration of why certain artistic traditions had developed in France rather than elsewhere. These international visitors enriched salon conversations not just through their different national perspectives, but through their experiences of cultural adaptation, their struggles to understand French customs, and their insights into how different societies approached similar questions provided natural topics for discussion that revealed universal human concerns beneath surface cultural differences. The craft of artistic collaboration. One of the most beautiful aspects of salon culture was how it facilitated artistic collaborations that would have been impossible in more formal settings. The relaxed atmosphere and extended time for conversation allowed creative minds to explore ideas together, often leading to innovative projects that combine different artistic disciplines. A perfect example of this collaborative spirit occurred during the winter of 1895, when Madame Emily Blanchard, a poet known for her delicate verses about nature, mentioned her desire to create a work that captured the experience of walking through a forest in early spring. Her description of light filtering through new leaves and the sound of a hidden stream sparked the imagination of several other guests. Monsieur Gabriel Moreau, a composer who specialized in chamber music, became fascinated by the rhythmic patterns Madame Blanchard described in her forest walk. He asked detailed questions about the tempo of footsteps on different surfaces, the intervals between bird calls, the way wind moved through bare branches versus those with new leaves. By the evening's end, He had outlined a piano composition that would translate these natural rhythms into musical language. Mademoiselle Céleste Dubois, a young painter and daughter of the salon's hostess, was inspired by the poetic and musical interpretations of the forest, seen to attempt a series of paintings that would capture not just the visual appearance of the woods, but the emotional experience of moving through them. She planned canvases that would use color and brushwork to convey the sense of anticipation, discovery, and renewal that the poet had described. Over the following months, these three artists met regularly to share their progress and inspire each other's work. The poet refined her verses based on the composer's insights into natural rhythm and the painter's observations about how light creates mood. The composer incorporated poetic meter into his musical phrases and used the painter's color theories to guide his harmonic choices. The painter experimented with brushstrokes that echoed musical phrases and tried to achieve visual effects that paralleled poetic imagery. The culmination of this collaboration was an evening presentation at the salon where all three works were shared together. Mademoiselle Dubois displayed her paintings around the room, while Monsieur Moreau performed his musical composition and Madame Blanchard recited her completed poem cycle. The effect was magical, as guests experienced how the same inspiration had been transformed through three different artistic languages while maintaining its essential spirit. This kind of cross-disciplinary collaboration became a regular feature of salon culture, leading to innovations in all the arts as creators learned from each other's techniques and perspectives. Writers began paying more attention to the musical qualities of their prose. Painters experimented with literary themes and narrative structure, while musicians explored ways to create verbal imagery through purely instrumental means. Gentle philosophy of daily beauty central to salon culture was a philosophy that valued beauty and meaning in everyday life rather than waiting for special occasions or major achievements. This approach to living influenced how participants arranged their homes, planned their days, and approached their relationships with others. The physical environment of Belle Epoque Paris supported this philosophy through attention to architectural details that made ordinary activities more pleasant. The wide boulevards created by Baron Haussmann were lined with trees that provided shade in summer and graceful silhouettes in winter. The uniform height and style of buildings created visual harmony that was soothing to the eye, while the abundance of small parks and gardens offered opportunities for daily contact with nature. Inside their homes, salon participants created spaces that reflected their commitment to daily beauty, rather than reserving their finest possessions for special occasions. They surrounded themselves with objects that brought pleasure during routine activities. Fresh flowers appeared on breakfast tables. Beautiful books were left open to favorite passages, and windows were arranged to catch the most flattering light for reading and conversation. This philosophy extended to personal relationships, where salon culture emphasized the importance of treating every conversation as an opportunity for genuine connection and mutual enrichment. Participants learned to listen with full attention, to ask questions that helped others explore their thoughts more deeply, and to share their own ideas with clarity and grace. The salon approach to friendship was particularly distinctive, emphasizing intellectual and emotional intimacy over social status or practical advantage. Friendships formed through salon connections often lasted for decades, sustained by shared interests and values rather than convenience or obligation. These relationships provided emotional support during difficult periods and intellectual stimulation during times of creative struggle. Even solitary activities were influenced by salon values, as participants learned to appreciate their own company and to find meaning in quiet moments of reflection. Many salon regulars developed habits of daily reading, writing, or contemplation that enriched their inner lives and prepared them to contribute more thoughtfully to group conversations. The art of seasonal celebration throughout the year The rhythm of salon life was gently shaped by the changing seasons, with each period bringing its own characteristic topics of conversation and forms of celebration. This seasonal awareness connected the urban intellectual community to natural cycles and provided a framework for appreciating different aspects of beauty and meaning. Spring salons were filled with excitement about new projects and fresh possibilities. As the days lengthened and the first flowers appeared in Parisian gardens, conversations turned to themes of renewal, growth, and hope. Poets shared verses about awakening nature, painters discussed plans for outdoor sketching expeditions, and musicians experimented with melodies that captured the energy of rising sap and returning birds. Spring cleaning tradition extended to intellectual life as well, with many participants using the season as an opportunity to organize their libraries, sort through accumulated notes and sketches, or clear their studios of incomplete projects that no longer inspired them. This physical renewal seemed to create mental space for new creative endeavors. Summer brought a more relaxed pace to salon life, with longer evenings that allowed for extended conversations and outdoor gatherings in private gardens. The intensity of winter discussions gave way to more playful exchanges about travel experiences, observations of nature, and experiments with new artistic techniques. Many participants would spend July and August in the countryside, returning to Paris in September with fresh perspectives and renewed energy for serious intellectual work. Autumn salons focused on harvest themes, both literal and metaphorical. Participants would share the fruits of their summer projects and reflect on what they had learned during their time away from the city. The approaching winter created a sense of urgency about completing current projects and preparing for the more intensive intellectual work that characterized the cold months. Winter brought the most serious and sustained conversations, as shorter days and indoor living created natural conditions for deep thinking and extended discussions. The challenges of cold weather and limited daylight seemed to concentrate minds on essential questions and encourage the kind of philosophical reflection that became the hallmark of the most memorable salon evenings. The legacy of gentle wisdom. As the Belle Epoque drew toward its close with the approaching storm clouds of World War I, the participants in salon culture had created something precious and lasting. They had demonstrated that intellectual life could be both serious and graceful, that artistic creation could flourish in communities of mutual support, and that ordinary evenings could become occasions for extraordinary human connection. The wisdom that emerged from these gatherings was gentle rather than dogmatic, based on careful observation of human nature and patient exploration of life's fundamental questions. Rather than claiming to have discovered final truths, salon participants had learned to appreciate the process of inquiry itself, finding joy in the gradual deepening of understanding that came through sustained conversation with thoughtful friends. Their approach to art and literature emphasized craftsmanship and beauty over shocking innovation or commercial success. They believed that creative work should enrich human experience rather than simply reflect its difficulties, and that artists had a responsibility to contribute to the store of beauty and meaning available to their communities. The relationships formed in salon culture provided models for how intellectual equality could exist between men and women, how international differences could enrich rather than divide communities, and how people of different backgrounds could collaborate creatively while maintaining their individual perspectives and talents. Perhaps most importantly, they had shown that culture is not something created only by exceptional geniuses, but something that emerges from communities of people who care about beauty, truth, and human flourishing. Their salons had transformed ordinary Tuesday evenings into occasions for the kind of conversation that makes life worth living. The eternal evening. As we reach the end of our visit to Belle Epoque Paris, imagine yourself once more in Madame Dubois's drawing room on a quiet Tuesday evening in spring. The gas lamps cast their warm glow over familiar faces, engaged in gentle conversation about eternal questions that have no final answers but infinite fascination. The clock on the mantelpiece chimes 11, and gradually the evening begins to wane toward its close. Guests begin to gather their coats and bid farewell to their hostess, making plans to meet again the following week. The carriages waiting outside will carry them back to their individual homes and private lives, but they will take with them the memory of ideas shared and friendships deepened. Madame Dubois stands in her doorway, watching the last carriage disappear into the Parisian night. The streets are quiet now, lit by gas lamps that create pools of golden light along the tree-lined boulevard. In a few hours, the city will begin to stir with the activities of another day. But for now, Paris sleeps peacefully, dreaming perhaps of beauty and truth and the gentle conversations that make human life meaningful. The salon tradition would not survive the great war that was approaching, but its spirit would live on in the memory of those who had experienced the magic of minds meeting in pursuit of understanding. They had created something beautiful and lasting, a vision of how human communities could be organized around the highest aspirations rather than the lowest fears. And perhaps, dear listener, as you drift off to sleep tonight, you can carry with you something of that gentle wisdom, that appreciation for beauty and truth and meaningful conversation. Perhaps you can create in your own life some small version of what those Parisians achieved in their golden drawing rooms, where Tuesday evenings became occasions for the kind of human connection that makes existence itself feel like a work of art. Sleep well, and dream of gaslit Paris, where the past whispers softly of possibilities that remain always within our reach. If only we have the patience to listen and the grace to welcome beauty into our ordinary days. The gentle clip-clop of horses' hooves fades into the distance, and all is quiet now in the city of light, where dreams and reality dance together in elegant drawing rooms, and where the art of living was practiced with the devotion others reserve for prayers.